8,
You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Show's going to be a little different today. We got our opening, we got one major news story, and then we're going to have a guest to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. So we're kind of put aside the normal joke thing, but I do want to talk about last night was the premiere of the Marvels, the world premiere, and immediately the reviews started coming out. And of course, the early reviews were absolutely positive because those were the people that Marvel invited to the studios, and they tend to be a little nicer. Since now there's about 100 reviews out, it's getting a little more middling. There's a huge range of reviews going from this thing is a lot of fun, Aman Vellani is awesome, having a great time, love the post-credit scene with the cameos, to, oh, this story is an absolute mess. But the things that they agree upon are a lot of Aman Vellani being an absolute standout as Kamala Khan, that her and her family are just the heart of the movie. The second thing they talk about is that the chemistry between the three leads, Monica Rambeau, Carol Danvers, and Kamala Khan, is really good, and it makes the fight scenes really good. So that's good to know. And the post-credit scene, we talked about it last week, so I won't say any of the spoilers here, but I did give you spoilers last week, and it's pretty much what we talked about. So if you stuck around for spoilers, then I can kind of verify. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. The reviews are coming out. What I want to wait for, though, is the audience reviews, because in a lot of Marvel movies, the critics are kind of all over the place, and you get these middling scores where they're hypercritical of everything. Where the audience reviews are the people that go in, they love the MCU, they go in, they watch the movie, and do they like it or not? And there's, sometimes it's like critic score is a 46 and the audience score is an 84. Well, I'm going to go with the audience score because those are my people. Critics tend to go in, they look at every little detail. That CGI wasn't quite in focus enough, and they didn't have a solid third act, and there was a Chekhov's gun that was introduced in the first act but was not used in the second or third act. And it's like, it's a comic book movie, it's superheroes, so go have fun with it, enjoy it. So all right, let's go ahead and jump in. Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. It is November 8th, Wednesday, new comic book day, so please remember to hit your local comic shops and spend a few bucks. And if you got two shops, maybe spread it out a little bit. Help them all along. But let's see, we've got Ed, we've got 360 Comics, we got Triple B, Bronze, Kenneth, and of course we have JD on the board, so welcome to all of you. It's good to see you. The premiere last night was interesting. Kevin Feige got asked a very blunt question, a couple blunt questions, one of which was, have you signed Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett Johansson to come back for the Avengers? And he said no. And of course he said no, because these rumors that are out there right now are ridiculous in the middle of an actor's strike because they can't sign anybody. They're not even supposed to be talking to them. So just keep that in mind when you see some of these review or these clickbait headlines. The other thing, though, he said that is important is he was asked point blank if his Star Wars movie was still happening, and he said no. So there's another rumor going around that Feige is going to leave Marvel and take over Star Wars for Kathleen Kennedy. That's not happening either, or at least it doesn't look to be. So just remember, when you click on these things, that's what they want you to do. So they put the most sensational headlines possible. That the sky is falling, MCU is dying, and Kevin Feige is leaving. But the odds are that none of that's true. So, okay. So what is our big news story of the day? And I'm pretty sure a couple of you are already familiar with it. I know that I've seen 360's name pop up on a couple of the sites that I was doing research on this morning. What it is I got a call last night from a friend of mine who is a collector and a dealer, and said, there is something big going on right now, and you might want to cover it for your show. So I have, he gave me a little details, but I did my research this morning, and it's an absolute mess. There are a ton of podcasts talking about this, but all of them are anywhere from 90 minutes to 4 hours. And of course, these are all sites that want to monetize. So they spend the first 15, 20, 30 minutes just saying hi to the people joining and waiting for more people to join. And so there is no real concise breakdown of what happened. So, close, one of the people involved, Queen's Comics Party, or Queen's Comics Podcast, did a pretty good concise breakdown, but I'm going to see if I can narrow it down a little more for you guys. So Ed says, yeah, I fell for the clickbait trap when they said they had a picture of Bigfoot riding a unicorn chasing a flying saucer. I was so bummed to find out that was misinformation. Yeah, I know. It was me riding the unicorn chasing the flying saucer. Sorry. Needed the money. All right. So the story that's out there right now in the comic collectible community, and it's, like I said, it's absolutely blowing up, and it's a whatnot vendor. And I think that's one of the keys here, is that this is a guy who isn't just anybody off the street. He actually does shows on whatnot. And the name is Epic Nation Collectibles. So he seems to have recently changed it to Collection, Epic Nation Collection. And he is being called out for, and I got to be really careful on how I put all this, but he's being called out for the actions that took place at Queen's Comic Party on October 28th. And from what I understand, Queen's Comic Party is like a weekly or bi-weekly convention that happens, little mini convention where a bunch of vendors come and you can go, and they have them all over the country. We've got one here called Frankensons, and that they do that like 3 days a week. So those are fun little conventions. Now, the story started when the folks at Queen's Comics discovered that they were missing a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 300 and Doctor Strange number 169. Now, Amazing Spider-Man is one that everybody recognized. Doctor Strange 169 is the first issue of Doctor Strange. 168 was Strange Tales. Oh, hey, cool. 360. I live about 10 minutes from Frankensons. And back when I was married 10 years ago, well, more than 10 years ago, my wife took over one of the booths there for a short period of time. So I know all about Frankensons. I've lived near it my whole life. So if you ever back out here, let me know. Now, the value of these books, Amazing Spider-Man goes for high end, it's about $800, and the Doctor Strange 169 goes for close to $114 or $1,400. So the value is pretty high, but Queen's Comics pretty much just says it's about $1,000 worth of books. At least that's what they've claimed. Now, when they noticed they were missing, they checked the security feed, because luckily it was pointed at the table, And they discovered that they discovered the person that took the books. Now, this is a particular move that I have heard of many times at conventions, and it's usually a two-person deal. What you do is you have somebody you take two people, they go to the same vendor. They don't necessarily act like they're together, they can, but the idea is that they're a little bit apart. The one person buys a stack of lower priced comics, but it's a good stack. And then, but this works if you have access to higher priced comics in the same area. Now, not all vendors have that big rack behind them where they can put their higher priced books. Some of them just have them mixed in the boxes. And those are the people that get hit by this. So what then happens is the partner does something to distract the vendor. They start asking questions. They start pointing at things in the book just to get the attention away from the mate, from what his partner's doing. And at that point, the partner pulls out the more expensive books they want, and they slide them into the books they've already paid for, and then they wander off. It's just a quick sleight of hand. And that's what they got caught on tape. Now, let's see. Pop Rap Art says, I know both parties involved and close to the individual. Okay. 360 says, yeah, my uncle lives in Topanga and I'm out there sometimes. Oh, cool. Reef says, my brother and I used to go to the old Frank and Sons location in the mid-90s. Yeah, I've been to all three of the locations. I was a regular there for a long time, which is also why I don't have a comic shop near me, because I have Frank and Sons. By the way, guys, if you know the story and I get something wrong, feel free to chime in and correct me. Again, this is me trying to put it together from all of these videos. All right, so what happens next is, when he puts the security camera on, it goes on multiple screens. So a few people see this is what the story is, and somebody recognizes not necessarily the guy doing the swiping, but the guy doing the distracting as Epic Nation Collectibles. I believe his name is Kevin. So now QCP tracked down a number for him, calls him up or gets a hold of him, says, hey, we've got this video. One of your guys stole a couple books from us. We either want the books back or the value of the books, which to me is pretty nice, because that could have been a call to the police instead. If you're looking at $1,000, that's, worthy enough for the cops to get involved. At least it seems like it is. He at first, from what I understand, denied it. And then they finally convinced him with the videotape. He said he went to go check his employees' stack, found the books, and he returned them. That's one thing important here. He did return the books. Mind you, he didn't take them back directly. He took them back to where they were and gave them to another person to turn them in, so he didn't have to confront them. Pop says, I was invited to a convention in New York, and I was at his office for a Whatnot stream. That was my first time for Whatnot, and the last time I'll ever go back. Okay. So he gives the books back, and that could have been the end of it. Except the other people that saw the video, it started popping up online. It started becoming a thing. Now, I don't know how they got the video, but a couple podcasts came out calling this guy a scammer. He got upset because he was being called out, tried to go to the Queen Comics guys, force them to, retract or put out a statement saying everything's good. And just tension started building and building and building. And it's kind of blown up from there. Now, the thing that seems to be getting lost in this whole thing is that while the Epic guy, he ended up going on a 90-minute rant. I tried to watch it. He was smoking a hookah through the whole thing, and it was just a very odd thing. But he tried to say his side of it. Queen's Comics has their side up on their podcast. But the thing that's being missed in all this, or forgotten in all this, is somebody tried to steal comics. Somebody stole comics. And that's the part that just seems to be getting glossed over. Now, as much as we enjoy a certain amount of Schadenfreude and watching this whole thing happen, that's the heart of it, is a guy who's a regular collectibles seller on Whatnot stole from another vendor at a convention. Now, was it his employee that stole and he knew nothing about it, as he claims, or was it something that they regularly do? Were those two issues going to suddenly show up on his show later on? We don't know that for sure, but it's kind of bad, you know. Pop says, Billy Baum, who is part of the Queen Comics guy, great guy, was next to me at the con. He did not escalate Kevin to a rant. Billy is a stand-up guy. However, Epic doxed him. Yeah, that's another part, is they were communicating back and forth through text messages. And during Kevin's rant, he put up Billy's phone number. And now Billy's getting a bunch of calls from people, you know, and that's not cool at all. Yeah, again, had he just taken the books back and he was quiet and they were quiet, it would have been. But I don't see Queen Comics as really doing much here unless they're the one that gave the video to the other podcasts. That's the part that I don't quite understand, how these other podcasts got a copy of the video. But it is up on the Queen City's website too, or on Instagram. So you can go to Queen Comics Party and all the stuff is up on Instagram. You can go to Epic Nation Collectibles. Their part of it's up on Instagram. But yeah, it's just a big, huge mess, you know? Now, the industry has changed a lot. It used to be that you bought a collectibles, when you bought something, you bought a run of books, you know, or either, I want all of John Byrne's Fantastic Four books, or I want Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb's run on Hush, or you just went out and said, I want every issue of Daredevil in my collection. Nowadays, people are more focused on key issues and variant covers. And it's kind of created this sub-market where these guys not only are, getting these variant covers and these keys and selling them, but they're also doing these one-off covers, variant covers with publishers. And it's, like I said, building this market. But we don't know anything about these guys, you know? I mean, we look here on the Experience, and you've got Miss Jen, who does her show, and she's got a storefront. You could actually find her. You could drive to her store and walk in, and she's going to be there. You know, we've got Comic Collectibles on. That's all backed by Dynamic Forces. That's a legit company. You know where they are. Most of our stuff have that kind of background. But when you're looking at somebody who, is like doing it out of their basement, then what is your recourse? What if something happens, So maybe the lesson to take away from this is, maybe just kind of keep a better eye or be a little more discerning of where you're getting your books from, because you don't know, they might be stolen from somebody else. And you don't want to make that a lucrative career, because I watched that video of them doing the swapping. Oh, you're fine, Pop. You're welcome to throw in the chat anytime. When the swap they did was smooth. It seemed like it was rehearsed. And again, I don't know if this was. I don't know if He didn't know what his employee was doing. He supposedly fired his employee live on Instagram, and I think that's been deleted now. But it sure looked like something they had done before, and it makes you wonder. And now you gotta, you just don't know. So, yeah. JD says, at least with the experience shows, we have a vested interest to make sure our shows are honest and above board. Yeah. And I'm hoping Whatnot does too. I'm hoping Whatnot does something. Maybe they need to investigate. Maybe they need to look at all the evidence. I don't know. Again, making those decisions are above my pay grade. But I tried to break it down as simply as possible, cut out all the hyperbole, cut out all the podcasts that are doing their shows and bringing in people and extra, suddenly other charges are coming out. This person scammed me. All that aside, those are the facts as we know them. So now you guys know. All right, we are going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to be joined by a good friend of mine, Braden, who is a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's and got a chance to see the movie, which I have not yet. And we are going to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. So stick around for that. We'll be right back.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rockin' Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales. Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
What if Hans Gruber from Die Hard had to battle the Joker from Batman the Animated Series in a dance battle? Or who would win in a race between Baby from Baby Driver and Snidely Whiplash? If Austin Powers and Shrek found themselves in a hot dog eating contest, who would emerge victorious? These are the questions we talk about on Nerd Killer Warfare. Debate the most absurd questions you've ever heard in popular culture. Register now by scanning the QR code or visiting bit.ly/EXP casting.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. Remember to stick around today. The Experience has got an amazing lineup. Not right after this, but at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern will be Comics Collectibles with Rex and John. They've got a great lineup of books. Then we have Talk and Treat Trivia. Not sure who the guest is today, but Chuck does a really good job with that show, and you can always win prizes. Then we have 360 Comics, who is currently in the chat, and that's a great show. You guys really, if you haven't checked it out yet, you should be watching that. And then end your evening kicking it with Henri. So we have a great lineup here. Stick around. Wednesday's always full. So, all right. Hey, Canadian Survivalist is here. How you doing, bud? Okay, let's bring in our guest. This is a good friend of mine. I've known him for a very long time. And yeah, he is a big Five Nights at Freddy's fan. How you doing, Braden?
Well, thank you for having me on here. Glad to be here. I don't know if I would describe myself as a big Five Nights at Freddy's fan these days, but that's just me. But first of all, nice to see you. Thank you for inviting me on the show. Man, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Where do we get started with that? Or where do you want to start?
Why don't you give us a little background on Five Nights at Freddy's? I know a lot of people, it's a very popular game. There's been, novels and a bunch of spin-offs and stuff. So before we get to the movie itself, what is the brief history on Five Nights at Freddy's?
Well, the start of Five Nights at Freddy's, as I understand it, is that game creator Scott Cawthon, he had made several Christian games, and they were very, very poorly received. Especially a lot of people criticized the models in those games for being scary. They were 3D modeled games, and they didn't prove a huge success. None of his games were a big success. So he decided to exploit the creepiness, the supposed creepiness of his models by making a horror game. And that's where Five Nights at Freddy's was born. It was born out of the idea of using what limited resources he had. Because, people got to have money, right? And we got Five Nights at Freddy's, which the original dropped on August 8th of 2014. That was a few days ago. So let's talk about the original Five Nights at Freddy's. As I understand it, you've never played the original game, which is,
No, but you've talked to me about it a lot, and I have a good understanding. But again, our audience might not.
Yeah. The original Five Nights at Freddy's is a survival horror game that, when it came out, it did things a little differently than others in the sense that you are a security guard who works at this Chuck E. Cheese-esque establishment place, and you're sitting in the office. You got a door to the left of you, a door to the right of you, and cameras, and you have to monitor those cameras to make sure the animatronics don't move around and try to kill you. The animatronics have this facial recognition system where they recognize you as an endoskeleton or the metal structure inside the animatronics, and they will try to put you in a suit. Now, with all those cross beams and wires inside the suits, that's going to kill you, right? So you got to make sure they don't get their hands on you. Now, the game elaborates a little bit with hidden Easter eggs and secrets that the animatronics are actually haunted. But haunted or not, you don't want to die from them. So the point of the game is to monitor the cameras and make sure that they don't get their hands on you. A simple premise, but it works pretty well. You have 5 nights. There's an additional 6th night. And if you pass the 6th night, you get the custom night. You can modify the AI levels of the animatronics to make them more difficult. Basically an easy, medium, hard mode, those kinds of things. And you can choose it for each animatronic. The game obviously pokes fun at Chuck E. Cheese and has its own cast of characters. Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Bonnie the Bunny, Chica the Chicken, Foxy the Pirate Fox. And there's this secret character, Golden Freddy, who you can see from time to time show up in the original game. The original game came out, and as I mentioned earlier, on August 8th of 2014. And at first, it wasn't a huge success. But when YouTubers got their hands on it, it quickly expanded. Most notably, if you guys have ever heard of Markiplier, he was and he still is a very popular YouTuber to this very day. And he's often called the king of Five Nights at Freddy since he played the first game and really brought it mainstream attention. Further notices of the game's lore and other things increased the popularity. It only increased it even more as people tried to figure out the mystery. The first few theories were sort of bizarre. I might get into that later. But either way, it was pretty clear that Scott Cawthon, the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, had struck gold, no matter, how you view it. Five Nights at Freddy's quickly turned into a giant financial and even critical success. And soon after, let me look into this a little bit more. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 dropped, I believe, in November of that same year. A trailer quickly came out, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2 dropped. And then Five Nights at Freddy's 3, I believe, came in March of 2015. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 followed shortly after that. And the rest, in some ways, is history. Five Nights at Freddy's now has, I believe, about 10 games under its belt, several comic book tie-ins, and obviously a movie, like what we're discussing today. So yes.
Now the first thing is that Freddy Fazbear's is not actively running. This is a shutdown. All the animatronics are dilapidated, in bad repair.
No, in the original game, now it is true in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 that there's new animatronics and there's old animatronics, and the old animatronics are withered. They call them the withered animatronics, simple enough. But the new, in the first game, the place is open. Now, the game takes place, I believe, about 86. So, Chuck E. Cheese and those establishments were more popular back in the day.
Yeah.
The element of it being abandoned is introduced in the movie. And we'll compare the movie to the games and some of the things I know about the books and other stuff later. But in the game itself, the place is open. The place is, in fact, open. And there is one animatronic that's defunct, Foxy. We might go into game mechanics later because that plays into how the movie executes the animatronics ultimately. But he is like defunct and he's in his own little cove and he'll come try to chase after you. But yeah, no, the place is in fact open. Haunted, but open, it seems.
But it's not that way in the movie, right?
No. In the movie, the place has been shut down for some decade now. I believe the movie takes place 2000, 2001, which is actually quite the time change from the first game. Now, obviously, the problem... I actually take that back. Let me take that back. The second game takes place in 86. The first game takes place in, I believe, about 93. But really, we'll have to go into a deeper discussion about that in a second because the game's got lore. They have very, very complicated lore that kind of that expanded as the games went on and was kind of being written by Scott Cawthon as the games expanded. So it's a bit messy, but it's pretty interesting. But as far as the movie's concerned, it's quite the departure since the original Five Nights at Freddy's seemed to take place in the early 90s. The game does have a slightly dilapidated look. If you ever looked at screenshots and stuff of it, there's cobwebs, there's dirty junk on the ground and stuff like that. This is clearly past the heydays of the 80s and the 70s in which those animatronic robots were far more of a success. And we can know that now in real history because Chuck E. Cheese doesn't even have the animatronics anymore in some places. So,
which is a shame.
Yeah. Well, they weren't always cute. Some of them were kind of scary. So,
how much of the lore? Let's kind of switch into focusing on the movie now.
Okay.
Because we only have a certain amount of time. How much of the lore is necessary to know to see the movie, or do they do a good job of giving you the information you need to understand what's going on?
You don't need to know technically anything, and that was the thing because Five Nights at Freddy's as a series, as a game series, as somebody who grew up with it and saw a lot of the stuff, it had a big lore and everything like that, but it's also quickly became, you ever heard of the idea of mascot horror? It's basically this idea that you come up with the characters first, then the game, which is died a bit in recent years, but there's quite a few modern day examples that are a bit more unknown to older audiences, but my generation knows them as mascot horror, and there is often frowned upon. Five Nights at Freddy started it, and back on topic to the movie is, I think the people that wrote this movie didn't want people to be forced to play the games, but it's pretty clear this movie's made for fans, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But technically, no, you don't need to know any of the lore. The story's made out pretty clear. It's pretty simplified, and there's a lot of combinations of things that happen throughout the games to make a far more simplified story for the movie, which makes sense. You can only do so much, and I believe the runtime for the movie is, hour and a half. Not so sure about that, but let's see.
Now, there's only like 5 basic characters besides the animatronics, right? There's Mike, there's the cop, there's Mike's sister, Mike's aunt, and the guy that gets him the job, right?
Yes. We have Mike Schmidt, the cop, his sister Abby. Vanessa's the local police officer. We have Steve Raglan, or however you pronounce his last name. He is the career consultant that gets him the job. And and there's Aunt Jane, who wants custody over Abby, which is kind of an interesting subplot of the movie. I don't know if I should spoil what happens, but
try not to.
Let's not. But
it does seem, from what I understand, a small cast like that may take away a bit of the mystery when you don't have as many people who might have done it.
Well, it's not. I mean, the thing with this movie, and I know you and me were talking about it before we got onto the show, is that it is a movie that has to be seen, be believed, because it's like every other video game movie, as in they're a hot mess. Either they're good or they're bad, like the Super Mario animated movie. And then you have the Super Mario movie from the 80s, which was, or was it early 90s? I forgot what year.
I think it was early 90s, but yeah.
Early 90s. But we all agree that movie is bad, just like we all agree. Overall, we agree that the Super Mario anime movie was a much bigger success. Then you have like the Mortal Kombat films and everything like that. Video games have not always made the safest adaptations into films for whatever reason. We can debate about that all day. So Five Nights at Freddy's, in a way, plays it safe. But I think in doing so, it alienates people, because this film and this discussion we're having revolves around this product that you would think a lot of people know, but I don't think, I guess in hindsight, Five Nights at Freddy's is a very much young people thing. It was, I talked to people of older generations, and it's kind of like talking about like Tetris, or something like that, which, I mean, Tetris is far different from Five Nights at Freddy's, but you kind of had to be there, or like the Atari, you kind of had to be there to completely get it. Five Nights at Freddy changed the horror genre, for better or for worse, for a time, and it still holds its empire to some extent. But with this movie, it could have been a chance to lure in a lot of old comers and a lot of newcomers. It has a lot of fan service, and I don't think that would be a great appeal to people that don't know these characters. Like, I mean, you have a basic understanding of Five Nights at Freddy's, but I watching it, I was like, that was cool. But trying to look at it from just a movie perspective, the film falls a bit flat, because there really isn't a mystery. The film does not sit here and lie to you that it's not the animatronics. It is totally the animatronics, which is fine to me, because anybody going into this movie knows it's the animatronics to some extent. Now, there is a twist to some people, to the people that don't know anything about the games, to the people that have seen the games or played the games. They know this twist is coming from a mile away. It's not really shocking, especially given who plays that character. But they end up being the big bad, and they get their comeuppance. So
now,
yeah.
Is that the same as in the game? I mean, what
simplified?
What makes the animatronic the animatronic creatures move? What gives them life? And also who the big bad is.
The big bad has not changed. How, why, and when he was disposed of has changed immensely. The basic idea of souls possessing animatronics is a key feature of the game. I think even people that just did a little digging are like, okay, possessed animatronics, right? That element has never really changed, and I don't think it ever will change. That's kind of what makes this game series what it is. So the whole possession stuff, I mean, once again, times have been changed, and the whole timeline has been compressed for general audiences, which is obviously the negative of making a video game movie in a lot of ways. You have to compress a lot of sometimes what's the best parts or the most interesting parts of the video game. And I don't know if Five Nights at Freddy's suffers that much from it, because honestly, the original Five Nights at Freddy's is actually, I'd argue, whether or not you've played it or not, just from concept, is a pretty timeless game. It could have come out a lot earlier. It could have come out right now. It's an effective concept. Now, later games, they expand. But the original, I think, works. And the biggest positive I'll give to it as movie material is that it just works. It just works. Now, I have issues with the execution. I might get into that later. But overall, I don't think the movie suffers that much from the compression of the timeline, especially since average audience members are not going to get it anyways. And
Right.
yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of Easter eggs in there, like you were talking about, some of which are references to characters that haven't shown up, or Sparky the dog, which doesn't actually exist in the game, but he gets a shout out on the restaurant name, or the appearance of a YouTuber, those kind of things.
Yes. Sparky, he was a hoax when the original game came out. Oh, this is a secret character, animatronic, evil. Ooh. He was never in the game, never in any of the games, but he got an animatronic cameo in this movie. Not active, but he does make a cameo. I hope that's not a spoiler for anybody. Wouldn't want to ruin the Freddy experience. But yeah, he's there. And it's kind of neat. It's a neat homage. There's a few different homages, which, once again, great if you know. If you don't know, it's fine. They really aren't that distracting. There are, if I recall correctly, two YouTubers that appear in the movie. Older audiences probably won't know who they are. Young audiences might not know who they are, or at least one of them. But nice to see them. There was even Markiplier, which I previously mentioned, was supposed to appear in the movie, but he had scheduling conflicts with his own production he was working on. I believe it was the Iron Lung film, which I might check out when it comes out. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe not. If you ever heard of the horror game Iron Lung, very good. You should check it out. But anyways, he was working on his own production, so he couldn't make it to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie.
That's a shame. So tell me about
Markiplier. Well, it's Mike.
Tell me about Mike Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt. Well, as far as a character goes, there isn't immense things to say about Mike Schmidt. He's in custody of his sister, because I guess the parents have died, I assume. And his aunt is trying to take over custody, apparently for some insurance or something like that. And there's this kind of conflict with all that. You do feel for the guy. The beginning of the movie has him attack a guy that he thinks is kidnapping a child at the mall. That was his previous job. It's kind of a weird scene, and it's never really elaborated on, but that's how he loses his job. Apparently he does that a lot. But in reality, he's got issues. He's looking for his little brother, who was kidnapped and presumed murdered. So that's a little rough. That is a little rough right there.
Yeah.
And he is always has visions. On his roof, he has a poster of the Colorado wilderness, of all things, taped to his roof. And when he's sleeping, he imagines that Colorado wilderness where his brother was taken. And he thinks that if he keeps envisioning the dream again and again and again, eventually he will discover a new detail. Who did it? And we eventually do find out who did it. And I guess you could say justice is served. But not too much justice, since it was PG-13. There was one off topic note. There was one immensely gory part in this film that was actually pretty shocking, but the rest of it's pretty tame. So if you wanted to show this to like your 12-year-old kid, I'm sure they won't be too traumatized. Some guy asked, "Is this movie for all ages?"
Yeah.
I mean, it really depends. There's some gore. There is some gore. The horror might scare a little kid. This definitely deserves the PG-13 rating. If your kid can handle a little bit of gore and some dark themes, you'll be fine. It's kind of funny because everybody that's watching this movie probably is either like a teenager, older teen, or young adult, or like a really young kid, which is kind of weird. Five Nights at Freddy's is still pretty big these days. You got a lot of little kids here. But they don't really get it. It's just, spooky animatronics. I don't know how much of a kick they'll get out of this movie.
Now, this is still in theaters, but it's also available on Peacock for the 7 people that actually subscribe to that.
Well, I had actually only ever heard positive things about Peacock, but I also did about 3 seconds of research on Peacock. So take that with a grain of salt. Not sure why it managed to make it onto Peacock. It made it there, but I guess went for revenue.
Universal owns NBC. Universal is the distributor for, even though it's a Blumhouse production, it's distributed by Universal.
Oh, Blumhouse. That's another interesting thing we never mentioned. Very, very strange. I don't know if you've heard about the production, how this movie went through. I believe it was Universal Studios, or not Universal, Warner Brothers, that was originally supposed to push out this production. Even in 2015, there were talks about making a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, but it never came to be, which I think raises a good question for people that have seen the film and even people that have not. Was it ultimately worth it? Is it ultimately worth it? Well, judging by the box office numbers, I'm going to say yes, it was worth it as far as money is concerned. But as a film, did it turn out to be the success? Well, I guess that depends. Obviously, you were talking about the characters a second ago, and the characters are pretty one note. Everything in this movie is a little one note. Now, usually when people say that, that's a bad thing. But once again, the original Five Nights at Freddy's is timeless in a timeless kind of way. It can be applied seemingly everywhere, and that kind of allows the story to move and flow. You might not always need the most exciting characters if you have these big, scary animatronics. Now, if you don't mind me interjecting, I gotta say, let's talk about the animatronics for a second, because they look great. They do look great. I believe it was Jim Henson's shop that made those. So
cool.
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of good quality pictures of the animatronics? Very well done works. Suitmation.
Yeah, and they look really close to the game versions.
Yes, the original game. The original game. So yeah, they did a very impressive job. There is two things I would note, but people that haven't seen the movie or aren't bothered that much by character design changes probably won't notice. One of the characters, Bonnie, he was clearly purple in the first game. He's blue now. Who cares? Golden Freddy looks a little different. This didn't ruin my experience, but I thought to the die-hard Five Nights at Freddy's fans, they might.
I think for symbology, they were using purple to signify something else in the movie. They were tying purple to the bad guy, so they didn't. That's why they probably changed the character, the animatronic, to blue. Well,
sometimes in the games he's blue and sometimes he's purple. So I think they Also, he's got pink eyes, so no infection as far as I'm aware, but he's got pink eyes. And I guess that maybe it contrasted, but I'm not here to debate about why a studio decided to change his color a little bit. We've had far more pressing issues with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie as just like a film. Because going back to the topic of I don't think this movie will be for everyone. I definitely think that, interestingly enough, this film was kind of trapped in a box, in a sense, in that it had to appeal to everybody, but nobody at the same time, if that makes any sense. And what I mean by that is that it had to be great for everyone. It had to be great for everyone. It needed to cover a big ground, right? But it also needed to satisfy the nitpicker, at least to some extent, which is why we got all those inside jokes and Easter eggs and gags, right? But people that don't know these characters very well probably won't find that much amusement from them. And otherwise, because of that, Five Nights at Freddy's just kind of is a standard enough horror film that does an effective enough use of its plot and story that it's given. Something that the first game, obviously, I mean, it started it. It makes a fantastic use, but I know this is going to be shocking, but Five Nights at Freddy stands stronger as a game than it does a movie. I implore everybody to, while I am not a huge fan of the series anymore, and I haven't really invested too much since the fourth one came out, it was kind of the end of my mass interest. I encourage everybody to try to play the first one. Very interesting game, just a point-and-click survival horror. And I think they did a decent conversion to film.
Well, JD brings up that they did $217 million worldwide on a $20 million budget. So yeah, we're probably going to get sequels.
Yep, but that guy, he said it great. Yeah, they're already working on a sequel. Is it going to be good? I was not amazed with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I guess we're moving to the more negative factors now. But I hope the best. This, if it's really a sequel to the second game, we'll be seeing the damaged animatronics and the new animatronics, and that'll have some contrast. But it does raise some problems because the lore has been so compacted and crushed and shortened for this film.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they have made it so that it's going to be harder to squeeze things in. They're really going to have to try to figure that out. And I hope they do. I'm actually, now I think about it, I'm sure they will. But I don't think it will do the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie any better. But
it'll probably be Five Nights at Freddy revival, that they're suddenly going to reopen the thing with new animatronics and the old ones are pissed.
Yeah, but that's kind of what I was getting at, like they can't satisfy anybody kind of thing, because then there's going to be people like, well, this isn't based off the game, so what's the point? We already have people mad that the animatronic was went from purple to blue, so clearly we got a bunch of nitpickers here, and because of that, I don't know if they can branch out too much. And that's another thing with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. It doesn't take any risks if you know anything about the story. And even if you don't, the movie doesn't particularly take any shocking risks. This is a franchise, though. So I think all of us around here are probably like, that is no shock. There is nothing that surprising about that. But in doing so, you're kind of watching the movie. Hey, that turned out exactly how I expected. Yay. Right? And the same goes for the big bad. And when the big bad does come in, it feels like the movie, once again, very commercial film, nothing wrong with that, but it's like the movie's checking its own watch, and it's like, we got to end this film. We got to go, right? So because of that, the ending feels very rushed, and some of the decisions are definitely less game inspired as more as plot inspired, and that's fine. That's the compromise you have to make when you make a video game movie, right? But once again, the meat and potatoes and what made the original game work, not even the sequels, nothing like that, is kind of lost a little bit. And that's where I bring the biggest shame up. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie woefully wastes the thriller factor of these animatronics, to me, without spoiling too much. The thing is that the original Five Nights at Freddy's was a point-and-click horror game. You're just at this location, and you're just trying to survive. It was very simple. I knew that this movie could not be the thriller that I thought I would hope it would be. A movie where a guy is just sitting in a room trying to protect himself is either going to be A, boring, or B, really good, which is, well, I'm assuming why they didn't go with that option, because not only is it very story limiting, but you better have somebody who can really direct and write to make that work. And I respect this movie for not taking that risk. But having just one scene, just one little scene of them checking the cameras and really trying to survive these characters would have been nice. I don't feel like they're a big enough threat. And there are some scenes that try to show a more sympathetic light. Now, I'm just going to say this. They are possessed by dead children. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh my God, they're horrible. The animatronics are horrible. The kids possessing them, I kind of feel bad. So, those more sympathetic moments we see are not necessarily a bad thing, since this movie's got a big bad in it anyways. But yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. We're just about out of time. But thank you very much for coming on and talking about the show and or talking about the movie. We'll have to have you back for some other movies and stuff to talk about.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Just one more thing. PG-13 film. Pretty decent. Doesn't use its full concept completely, but I did have fun, and you might have fun too, or you don't. I give it a 5 out of 10, but I did have a decent time. So could have been a lot worse. Could have been a whole lot worse. But
all right, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We had we had lots of people today. This was great. Ed, Triple B, 360, Bronze, Kenneth popped in, Pop Rap. Reef the Sea Forever. That's a great name. So, and thank you, JD, on the board. We're going to wrap this up now. Have a great night. I will see you guys tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow night, Loki season finale, debut, and the premiere of, the first night of the Marvels. So, lots of Marvel tomorrow night. Have a great night, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.